Good morning, everyone. I see people coming in. Very happy to have you here at our session on the WASH response to climate change. We're just waiting for everyone to join the session, and we'll start in a minute. In the meantime, while we're waiting, you can introduce yourself in the chat by telling us your name, your organization, and maybe if you have the time, what brings you here today. We would love to hear that. Yeah, so for the people who just joined, we're just waiting for everyone to come in. Please introduce yourself in the chat so we know who we have here with us today. Hey, welcome everyone to this World Water Week session, the WASH response to climate change. We're really happy to see you here, and we're looking forward to explore the connection between WASH service delivery and the effects of climate change together with you. I'm Femke van Heun, Knowledge Management and Learning Officer at CIMAVI and your host for this session. We hope to have an open exchange here and learn from each other's knowledge and experiences. But before we do that, let's see who's in this virtual room together with us. We're going to do a quick poll. I know it's very early in the morning for some of us, so it's also a little energizer to get you going today. The poll is on the Pathable website, so that's the browser you just entered this Zoom session from. And there, when you go to polls, it's next to the chat. I see also people introducing themselves there, so that's great. Just for the record, we try to use the Zoom chat here because otherwise we have a lot of two open chats, and this way we can facilitate the discussion a bit better. But next to the chat, you also see it here on the screen, you go to polls. And I would like you to answer the first question, where are you from? And you should be able to see all the answers there. Yes, I see some answers coming in. And also, please let us know if you can't access the poll or if we can help you with anything. Okay, I see some people from Asia, from Europe. Well, I hope everyone who's in Europe or Africa right now has their coffee and tea ready. It's still quite early here, or a bit earlier than we're used to. But good to see so many people from all over the world. Really happy that you're all here. We'll move on to the next question. What type of work do you do? I see people already filled that in. That's great. I see people working on programs, on a think tank, management. That's really nice. We hope to see and hear all your perspectives today. Okay. But before we do that, I'd like you to introduce you to my co-host, Geert van der Meijden, the WASH SDG Consortium coordinator.
Thank you, Femke. Good morning, everyone. Well, good morning, good afternoon. Really nice to see you all here. And on behalf of the WASH SDG Consortium, welcome. So just I would like to tell you something about the WASH SDG program. I mean, this is hosted and developed this session by the WASH SDG Consortium, and the WASH SDG Consortium is implementing the WASH SDG program. The program itself is funded by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Director General International Cooperation and Inclusive Green Growth Department. One of the representatives will be here today as well and will give in the end a reflection. So the Dutch program, this program, this WASH SDG program, responds to the Dutch commitment to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals and of course, especially SDG 6, with the aim to reach an improved wash sanitation for all. The consortium consists of the WASH Alliance International, why we abbreviated SNV and Plan International in the Netherlands. The WASH Alliance itself is an alliance of over 100 partners worldwide. So during this session, we will meet people from Plan, SNV, and also Y members. The WASH SDG Consortium is led by CIMAVI. The WASH SDG program started in 2017. And here you see on the screen the blue, these are not lakes. The blue are the countries in which we are working, the 7 countries. In each of those 7 countries, we have in one case 1, and in the other country, we have 2 sub-programs, we call it, but that's projects. Working, and you see all the facts on the side as well, in 73 different locations, also meaning 73 different local counterparts. The program started in 2017, and climate resilience and vulnerability was part of it from the start. However, what we see now, and probably you all see it in your sectors as well, is that the impacts of climate change are more and more felt and more seen. And also in the WASH sector and in our sub-programs. And therefore, we decided to start up an additional knowledge and learning development trajectory. We have several in our program. We also had one on gender equality and social inclusion and on sustainability. And now we added one on WASH and climate. So what we do normally during in that trajectory is to have several webinars, to have access to an expert, to ask questions, so that during those webinars, sub-programs or projects can exchange experiences, how they adapt to the situations, how they adapt their methodologies, and in that way learn from each other. So what we are actually going to do today is very much similar to one of these learning sessions that we normally do as a WASH SDG program. So the aim is to learn from each other. It's not the aim that we provide the answers to things. No, we are also exploring on how to better respond actually to the climate change effects we all see in the world. So what I mentioned before, CIMAVI is in the lead of the WASH SDG Consortium. CIMAVI has a new director, Dineke van der Wijk, and Femke asked her some questions about climate change. Dineke has a lot of experience, many years of experience working in Asia and Africa. And she, we asked her some questions like, what have you seen changing in your career actually? So let's have the look at the video, the interview.
How have you seen the development sector change over the years due to climate change?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I think the impact of climate change is very visible in the development sector, but also specifically in the WASH sector. I think first of all, in many of the countries where we work as organizations, we have seen the impact of it over the past 10 years. Floods, droughts, all of it. But I think also at a global level, we see more impact nowadays. I mean, look in the Netherlands at the moment, there's a big discussion about the droughts in the Netherlands and the water supply. So I think the attention of the impact of climate change on the water sector is growing. I think if you look at the kind of a bigger picture, I think it's really contributing to the inequality gap that we have in many countries, in many societies in the world, where the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And then, of course, climate change impacts specifically on the role of women who are collecting water, for example, and the time spent on collecting water, as well as on other aspects of being able to survive in climate prone or climate high risk locations. I also think a factor is that it's important that we adopt a holistic approach. The problem is growing, so a holistic approach and a strategic approach to finding lasting solutions becomes more urgent and critical. And for that, actors, whether those are partners, whether those are working with governments, research institutes, name it, across the globe, need to work very closely together. Because only together we can make a difference, and only together we can find lasting solutions. So quality of the work is essential, as well as the quantity, because the scale is also growing. I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you. And how has climate change impacted the work of the WASH SDG Consortium?
Yeah, I think that's quite obvious. If I build on my response that I've just given. So in the countries where we work, we see increased vulnerabilities, increased risk, floods, droughts, and the impact of that on daily life. The impact of that has meant that we have had to adopt our program strategies in certain locations, more flexible approaches, more tailor-made approaches, but also that the partners with whom we work, the communities with whom we work, as well as governments with whom we work, that they actually see the need and the urgency for a strong strategy and a strong implementation of the project. I think that are the key elements. I mean, there are some examples where we have built kind of basic toilets in a location, but actually due to floods, they didn't last very long. But then the communities lobbied the government to get additional funding to actually build climate resilient toilets. So that's a small example, a simple example, but quite important. So the resilience angle and the lens that we apply in the WASH SDG program is really critical. And that's not only about design, it's also the mindset that is absolutely essential, and the need for tailor-made approaches.
Thank you. And today we're going to talk about the WASH response to climate change. What are your expectations of this session?
Yeah, thank you. Very important. So for me, I really hope that the participants, as a starting point, will be able to share kind of the learning so far, reflect on the learning so far, but that we make a next step collectively. And so have an open mind towards the future, have a resilience or climate change lens to the work and the discussions that we will have, and that we think into the future, because we need to be mindful that the vulnerabilities that communities are faced with in the locations moving forward, that we take that into the mix, as well as, of course, who are those people that live in the context, and the urgency of the situation. So climate adaptation, climate mitigation is really critical. And I hope that mindset can be brought into the conversation. And a bit of system thinking, because we need to look for long-term solutions. And we collectively have a passion to find long-term solutions. So I wish you well having these conversations. I think it's really good that we are meeting and connecting. And I hope we will have fruitful conversations.
Thanks, Femke and Dineke, of course. I think there were already very clear examples on how we can deal as a WASH sector, or how we can respond to climate change. Also, examples.
How have you seen?
Also, some examples of how climate change is affecting people everywhere in the world. I think we can all come up with some examples of how climate change is affecting our lives or the lives of our people around us. Different sectors are therefore developing different strategies or similar approaches to adapt and to develop to adapt to this new situation, but also to even one step further is to maybe even mitigate. How can we make sure that climate change will not become bigger and bigger, the effects of it, or even reduce climate change? So also the WASH sector is clearly feeling the effects of climate change. Some examples were already mentioned by Dineke. Other examples are that the water resources are getting less reliable. Where they were available whole year round, now they are not available the whole year round. The flooding of toilets was already mentioned by Dineke, but also overflowing of septic tanks. The worst thing maybe of it all is that these effects of climate change are hitting the most vulnerable the hardest. So today we will hear from three WASH SDG sub-programs on what effects climate change has in their sub-programs and how they are trying to deal with it. So how they are adjusting their methodologies and approach. Once more, the aim of the session is not to provide answers to you, it's to learn from each other, to also get input from outside the sector, as sometimes outside the sector they are already further developed in certain aspects, and the WASH sector can learn from that. So we think that only, and that's why we also have this learning trajectories, we think we can only learn or improve if we learn from each other. Something might work well in one situation, it might not work in the other situation, but it could also be, you know, something that can be tested. So, oh, you are doing this, maybe we can adjust this in our approach as well and start implementing. So these are the three cases that are coming up. So it's Plan Indonesia with a case on climate resilience and Jessie-friendly WASH. And Femke will introduce the speakers to you. One more thing, that every presentation will end with a statement or a question, and that question is to be addressed to a panel. We will have a panel discussion afterwards. I will later on tell you a bit more about it. So the presentation will end with it, and then later on that will be the starting point for a discussion, a panel discussion. Okay.
Thank you. So in the upcoming minutes, 30 minutes, you'll learn a lot about the WASH SDG's response to climate change in various contexts. So first you'll hear from Plan Indonesia. Geertje just explained that. After that, we'll have SNV Zambia about how a sanitation service model can assist with climate change adaptation and mitigation. And last but not least, the Uganda sub-program will share if basic nature-based approaches can be used as a first line of response to climate change-induced floods in hard-to-reach communities. In case you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the chat and we'll answer them during the panel or the Q&A after. So you first hear from Neki Nitbani from Plan Indonesia. She is a global health practitioner with interest in water and sanitation. She's now the monitoring and evaluation coordinator of the WASH SDG sub-program in Indonesia. Neki, over to you.
Thank you, Femke. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Today, I'd like to talk about building climate resilient and inclusive WASH in rural areas as a lesson learned from Eastern Indonesia. And there is a video I'd like to show you before the presentation. So Sandra, please, if you could play the video for us.
Nusa Tenggara merupakan kepulauan di wilayah timur Indonesia dan menjadi rumah bagi lebih dari 5 juta keluarga. Selama 5 tahun terakhir, wilayah Nusa Tenggara telah menghadapi ancaman perubahan iklim yang serius, seperti meningkatnya intensitas badai siklon, kekeringan, dan banjir. Perubahan iklim telah berdampak luas di berbagai sektor, yakni kesehatan, pertanian, termasuk air bersih, dan sanitasi. Kelompok rentan seperti anak, perempuan, dan penyandang disabilitas menjadi kelompok yang paling terdampak akibat perubahan iklim.
Jadi banjir Seroja tahun 2021 itu berawal dari hujan dengan intensitas yang cukup tinggi sehingga terjadi banjir kiriman dari sana.
Sumur tergenang air banjir juga tertutup lumpur. Teman-teman yang disabilitas, apalagi yang perempuan saat mau mengakses ke jamban juga susah sekali waktu itu.
Untuk mengatasi dampak perubahan iklim, Plan Indonesia melalui program WASH SDG telah berupaya untuk mendorong masyarakat dan pemerintah untuk melaksanakan adaptasi perubahan iklim di sektor air dan sanitasi melalui kolaborasi multi pihak.
Strategi yang dilaksanakan oleh Plan Indonesia adalah melalui kolaborasi dengan semua elemen masyarakat, termasuk dengan pemerintah, dengan PKK, dengan tokoh masyarakat, termasuk juga dengan organisasi penyandang disabilitas. Kami meyakini bahwa semua elemen masyarakat memiliki potensi untuk membantu mengatasi krisis iklim ini sesuai dengan kapasitas mereka masing-masing.
Pemerintah saat ini melalui kerjasama dengan lembaga swadaya masyarakat berupaya untuk membangun fasilitas yang dibutuhkan oleh kaum disabilitas. Misalnya pembangunan WC yang lebih memungkinkan kaum disabilitas bisa leluasa menggunakannya tanpa bantuan orang lain.
Dalam melaksanakan kegiatan adaptasi perubahan iklim, Plan Indonesia selalu mendorong agar komitmen dan rencana aksi yang dilakukan oleh semua pihak selalu mengharusutamakan perlindungan anak, kesetaraan gender, dan inklusi sosial. Hal ini untuk memastikan agar suara-suara dari kelompok marginal bisa didengar dan diperhatikan oleh masyarakat.
Dengan adanya bersama bermitra dengan Plan dan Pijar Timur, teman-teman penyandang disabilitas itu bisa dikenal di setiap desa, bahkan kecamatan maupun kabupaten.
Manfaat dari toilet yang sudah inklusif ini sangat membantu saya karena dari depan WC saja sudah ada pegangan hand dryer itu, jadi saya sudah bisa, kalau mau licin saya pegangan di itu besinya, jadi sampai masuk juga ada pegangan, sudah tidak duduk harus jongkok lagi, jadi ada pegangan di dalam, saya tidak takut untuk jatuh lagi.
Yes, thank you, Sandra. So the video has shown you several footages from the recent Seroja tropical cyclone. And these disasters, as you can see on the slides, they have become threats to our efforts in achieving total sanitation. So, for example, the recent Seroja cyclone caused a slight increase in open defecation rate. So as of 2021, there are still 7% people practicing open defecation in Malacca district. And the reason being the flooding. The floods swept away the household toilet at the floodplain of a river. And the flooding also caused the household toilet pit to fill or collapse. And we also seen an increase in unimproved household toilet, indicating that there are households sharing toilet while their toilet is being repaired or rebuilt. Next slide, please. And we have worked with marginalized groups for the past 4 years, and during this crisis, they remain the most affected groups. And toilets inaccessible, as the lady said in the video, due to lack of handrail and slippery floor from the muds. So how do we tackle this crisis, this problem? Next slide, please. So as the video briefly mentioned, our approach, we put a lot of emphasis on working together with multi-sectors, including the government. So we started with climate change impact assessment in WASH and in vulnerable groups. And then we shared our assessment, our findings with the government and the community representatives. And together we developed action plan on inclusive and climate resilient WASH. Next slide, please. The action plan then followed by different course of action from different actors. So, for example, at the government level, we aim for climate change adaptation or CA mainstreaming in the WASH-related plan, such as works or regional regulation in sanitation or in WASH in general. At the community level, next slide, please. With the spirit of communal work, together with WASH entrepreneurs, village officials, disability organization, and the communities in the neighborhood, we built an inclusive and climate resilient toilet prototype. Next slide, please. And for disability organizations, they have been on the forefront of inclusive and climate resilient WASH. They led the campaign at the government level while empowering the rest of the people with disabilities to part in CCA in WASH. In addition, people with disabilities, with WASH entrepreneurs, design and build inclusive and climate resilient toilet. And to ensure appropriate technology was built, a rapid assessment using survey or group discussion was carried out to understand the barriers and potential hazards. Next, please. This is Adriana Ike. You met her in the video before, and she's the lady whose toilet was built inclusive and climate resilient. Let's take a closer look at her family. Next slide, please. She lives in a village with regular occurrence of floods, and during group discussion with her, it was discovered that the flood water usually reaches 40 centimeters depth on average, and it's often waterlogged, and there was no handrail for her to support herself. The toilet was then built, designed, built, and tested together, and then to make it climate adaptive, several adjustments were made. Such as the floor is raised by 40 centimeters, replacing the squat toilet with seated toilet, and the pit is fully covered with concrete. The key takeaways I'd like to share with you, next slide please, is that there is an urgent need for a national action plan on CCA, on WASH as an overarching regulation for local government to adopt or to base their regulation. The second thing is that disability organization is an empowered organization that can raise awareness on inclusive and CCA sanitation issues. When given opportunities, people with disabilities are more than capable to contribute. And as we have learned, DPOs can lead the process and be actively participating, including during rapid need assessment or barrier and hazards mapping, which is essential for an appropriate toilet design. The third thing is that we do realize that the cost of building an inclusive and climate resilient toilet can reach 3 times of people's monthly income. It's expensive. But there are alternatives available, such as local materials can be used, and also government subsidies through village funds is also available. That's why we include the village officials in the process, and also community contribution to cut labor costs. The fourth thing is that each actor's VCA and inclusiveness awareness can contribute based on their own capacity. So, for example, WASH entrepreneurs in provision of affordable and accessible toilet, disability organization, the government, and of course the community. So how do we take this inclusive and climate change resilient WASH to the next level? Next slide, please. We can do it by one, prioritize and empower marginalized groups in CCA as they are the most affected groups. And we can do this by working in partnership with disability and women's organization. We can also encourage the national government to develop action plans as a foundation to CCA at the local level. And then, of course, to encourage everyone to work together as a team. And the last slide, next slide, please. Yeah, I'll conclude this presentation with the questions for us to discuss. How to make climate resilience and GESI or gender equality and social inclusion happen in your context? Yeah, I'm Neki Nidbani from Plan Indonesia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neki. Thank you for the great presentation and the insight in the work that you're doing. We'll discuss the statement later. And now we'll continue with Maria Carrero from SNV. She is a WASH expert with 14 years field experience in West Africa, Southeast Asia, and Southern Africa. Her areas of expertise include WASH behavior change communication, monitoring and evaluation, and gender and social inclusion. She has been managing the WASH SDG program for the past 5 years and the last 2 years in Zambia. Maria, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Femke. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this session. So we'll be discussing how to improve safely managed sanitation while addressing also climate change adaptation and mitigation, looking at the scheduled desludging in Kabwe, Zambia. Next slide, please. So welcome to Zambia, and next slide, please, to the project locations of the WASH SDG program. We have in the northern parts of the country in Bala, and we are also working in Mukulungu and in Kasama and in Nakonde and in Kabwe, which is the town targeted by this pilot. In Zambia, the program is called the Shambeshi Lukanga Sanitation Project. Some highlights about the context in Zambia, and specifically in Kabwe town. So Kabwe is the capital of Central Province. It is the 4th biggest city in Zambia. It has a population of roughly 214,000 people, which live in around 43,000 households. And some WASH figures as well. Sanitation is managed by the Lukanga Water and Sanitation Company. You should know that 75% of the people on this town rely on on-site systems, mostly pit latrines, though there are also septic tanks. Open defecation was at 1% in 2021, and also in 2021, the percentage of sludge that was reaching the treatment site was 16%. So this is the context in which we operate in Kabwe. Next slide, please. Now, we did a baseline in 2018, and in 2021, we did a midterm to assess the progress of the program on some key performance indicators. So you can see here that there was significant improvements in terms of safely managed sanitation, and also in terms of reducing open defecation, as well as in terms of reducing unimproved sanitation. Some highlights, please, Sandra. So open defecation was reduced by 83%, unimproved sanitation was reduced by 52%, and safely managed sanitation was increased by 56%. Next slide, please. The midterm review also revealed improvements in terms of the use rate of fecal sludge services. So if you recall, most of the facilities are on site, which means that fecal sludge services are an essential component to improve safely managed sanitation in Kabwe. So when we began in 2018, the use rate was at 1%. In 2021 was at 5.5%. Now the target is of course 25%, as you can see, if all facilities were timely emptied. Sandra? Now that is a 450% increase, but still below the 25% ideal. Yes, next slide, please, Sandra. Another key performance indicator is the affordability of the fecal sludge services. So at the beginning, we could see that the cost of an emptying service was not affordable for the lowest wealth quintiles, and in the midterm, the situation remained the same. This is because you have to make, or from a utility point of view, the service needs to be sustainable. So they can't really reduce the cost of the service, but the cost of the service as it stands, as I said, is unaffordable for the lowest wealth quintiles, mostly because people are required to make a lump sum payment, which takes quite a toll in the context of people's income. Now, the service remained not affordable for the lowest wealth quintiles, and at the same time, Sandra, the sustainability of the fecal sludge services did not show improvement. So the service is, of course, in place, fees are charged. These fees are enough to cover operation and small maintenance costs, but they're not enough to cover major repairs or capex, and certainly not enough to generate a profit margin. So the challenge then becomes how to balance the revenue that is generated by the fecal sludge service with the long-term sustainability of the system, which is not enough to invest in it. Next slide, please. Now, we also did an assessment of climate change impacts, both at baseline and at midterm, and there are a number of questions around that. I'm sharing one of those. So at the beginning of the program, we asked at the household level if people's toilet was flooding. So in the beginning, it was 7% of the people said so. At midterm, 10% of the people said so. Now that is, Sandra, a 43% increase on the number of toilets that flood. And this is, of course, a trend that we don't expect to see improving as the program moves forward and as climate change becomes more and more challenging. Next slide, please. So as we move on to the final phase of the project, the big question we were dealing with was how to sustainably increase safely managed on-site sanitation in a context of climate change. This big question can be broken down into sub-questions. So we want to see how we could further increase the demand for safe emptying services from the 5.5 to the 25%. We also want to see how to maintain and expand safe fecal sludge service provision. We also want to see how to increase both the financial sustainability of the fecal sludge services while increasing affordability. And finally, how could all of this be done in the context of increased climate change? Now enters the approach we're using, which is scheduled desludging. Scheduled desludging, next slide, please, is regularly and following a pre-established schedule, a licensed desludging unit comes to a registered customer to empty their sanitation facility and deliver the sludge to a treatment plant. Now, why did we pursue a pilot on scheduled desludging in Kabwe? What were the benefits that we envisioned when we decided to experiment with it? The first benefit is that it allows the utility to better plan and manage its resources. So rather than having random trucks responding to on-call demand, it can be planned, it can be better organized, so it offers performance gains. Secondly, it also enables the utility to anticipate the sludge that reaches the fecal sludge treatment plants. So in terms of treatment efficiency and potential for reuse, there are also important gains there. Thirdly, it also supports the utility to better know and service its customers. So part of the scheduled desludging approach includes a GIS mapping. So the utility can understand exactly how many customers and what type of customers it has. So it also allows it to expand its credibility and expand its customer base. Fourthly, it facilitates the utility to better differentiate its customer base. So the GIS mapping I just mentioned also allows to identify which areas are low income, which areas are middle or upper income, and allows to also consider the possibility, for instance, of cross-subsidizing the wealthier areas and the poorer areas. So it also offers pro-poor and equity gains. The fifth benefit is it also facilitates the replacement of the lump sum payment, which, if you recall, was unaffordable for the lowest wealth quintiles, by small monthly installments. So in terms of affordability, there are very significant gains because it's going from, let's say, paying 500 kwacha for an emptying service to paying 20 kwacha per month. So there's a very substantial gain in terms of affordability. And the sixth benefit is that at scale and over time, it increases the revenue for the utility, also because it reduces any marketing efforts necessary to promote emptying services. So people are just registered, the utility has the customer database, though it becomes a much cheaper payment per month. Cumulatively, it becomes a significant amount of money, especially once the whole town is covered by the service. So there's also increased profit gains from the utility point of view. Now, there is a seventh benefit, which is scheduled desludging is also a more attractive model for the private operators. So private operators are partnered already with the utility. And before scheduled desludging, what would happen is that they would respond to the demands of the customers. It was very difficult for them to plan. Whereas they have now, within the scheduled desludging program, they know exactly how many customers they are supposed to service every month. So it's a much more safe business model for the private operators, which ultimately will increase the outreach, the business, and the employment gains associated with sanitation services. It also reduces the use of informal and unsafe emptying services. So people, instead of calling the utility, or as it still happens, calling just some person that can empty their toilet, they are within a scheduled program, they are registered customers, so that the likelihood of them resorting to unsafe services is significantly reduced, which ultimately, of course, has environmental and public health gains. It also minimizes on-call. It does not eliminate, but it does minimize on-call scheduling services. So people normally would call the service once their toilet was clogged or overflowing. And of course, when that happens, we are already dealing with the situation of fecal sludge in the household environment. So at this level, by minimizing on-call services, it also has, yet again, environmental and public health gains. There's still a 10th benefit, which is, of course, preventing the toilets and the containments from overflowing, because they are on a schedule, they're emptied on a regular basis. So that again reduces the likelihood of the toilet ever overflowing. The 11th benefit, and we go back to the GIS mapping I referred before, because it also asks about what is the situation in terms of flooding. It also allowed the utility to identify what areas of the town are flood prone. And then by knowing that and by having an organized service, it is possible for the utility to prioritize those areas and, for instance, to conduct preemptive emptying before the rainy season begins. And these are, of course, climate change adaptation gains. Now, before to introduce the 12th benefit, next slide, please. I want to share with you a very recent article that was published just 2 months ago. It's called Whole System Analysis Reveals Greenhouse Gas Emissions from Citywide Sanitation in Kampala, Uganda. It's a very interesting read. I do advise you to have a look. And that article showcases an investigation that took place and that shows that more than half of Kampala's greenhouse gas emissions are generated from sanitation. Of course, that is the method. It also showed that long periods of storage in anaerobic tanks generate 49% of the total greenhouse gas emissions. So we are in a situation where the better the containment, the higher is the generation of greenhouse gas or emissions or method. Of course, nobody is advocating to go back to unimproved or unlined toilets or pits, but it is a fact, and it's something that we must acknowledge and try to manage. It also showed, very interestingly, that the emissions from the transport of fecal sludge, of course, we are talking about on-site systems that the contents of the pits need to be transported from the household to a treatment plant were so low that were considered negligible in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. And at the end of the article comes an important statement, which is one of the key recommendations, that better and more frequent emptying and transport are an intervention that can quickly reduce greenhouse emissions. So with this in view, Sandra, please, we added a 12th benefit to a scheduled desludging process, which is to prevent the sludge from sitting too long in containments. So if you remember, the emptying interval recommended was 5 years. With this pilot, we are using a 2 years interval. So we can also look at potential climate change mitigation gains by reducing the emissions of methane. Next slide, please. So the question I leave you with is, to what extent can a sanitation service model assist with climate change adaptation and mitigation, which we hope we can discuss during the Q&A, because this is, of course, very innovative research, and it's important for everybody in the sector to be aware of it and to contemplate its implications. My name is Maria, and I am the WASH sector lead for SNV in Zambia. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Maria, for the great, insightful presentation. Maybe also nice to hear that we, or everyone learned about this article in the LKD, like the learning trajectory we have of the WASH SDG program. So this is also an example how we learn from each other and from experts in the field. And from Zambia, we're going to Uganda. You will hear from Heron Okulu from Joint Effort to Save the Environment, or JESSE, and this is a partner of the WASH Alliance International. He is an environmentalist by profession and a project officer on integrated water resources management with JESSE. He has been working in the Agago district under the WASH SDG program for the last 2 years. Heron, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to take you through on our slide, which is construction of trenches as a flood control measure in a village called Kamonoje, which is in Agago district, Agago subcatchment area. Next slide, please. About Kamonoje village, Kamonoje is found in Latiling parish. It is one of the flood-prone areas, which has about 8 villages. And in the 8 villages, we're working in Kamonoje village, which has about 46 households. The soils in the area has low water holding capacity and retention capacity. Next slide, please. From the experience in the field, we had testimonies and from various people, and one of them is Ochaka Robert, who told us that the flooding started around 2012 when they returned from the internally displaced people's camps. Yet they had been told before that the floods last happened in the 1950s. Then, as the flooding continued, the houses and the latrines started falling from around 2016 to 2019. Because now, whenever it floods, they could not construct latrines during the rainy season. The latrines always fall off because the pits are always filled with water, and the walls also weakened. The same with the houses that they sleep in. It gave us that probably the practices that their grandparents or great-grandparents practiced those days, because they lie in the micro-catchment that feeds the water into Agago sub-catchment. So most of the waterways are already blocked. Thank you. Next slide. Another experience from Rebecca Akidi. They could not cook with the local 3-stone stoves because always the compound is filled with water up to about 10 centimeters high off the ground. And then also in the kitchen or in the bedroom where they're sleeping, there's always water coming from the underground. This sometimes makes them to migrate. And then also the garden is also always filled with water and the crops destroyed. So this most times it leads to famine because now there is nothing there are no more yields from the garden. Thank you. Next slide. Another testimonial experience from Adong Erobina. The water runoffs always make the roads impassable. Yet they have to access the only borehole that they have in the area. Most times when it is now inaccessible, they always go to the nearest river, which is River Gago, which is south of the village. Next slide. These are the challenges that are being faced in Kamonojo village or the neighboring villages because they're in the same parish. There is a lot of flooding, which goes up to about 10 centimeters high, the weakening and the falling of the latrines, homes covered with the water runoffs, and then leading to migration from that area. Most times during the rainy season, you find few people in the community because most of them migrate to other areas to go and dig. Then also on the other social aspect, it also leads to domestic violence because if the woman doesn't cook, then the man comes from maybe doing some other work, it leads to, because there is no food, it leads to domestic violence. Then also waterlogging of the farmlands, as you can see in the pictures. And then also inaccessibility of the roads, if they're supposed to go and fetch water, then also do some other things. During the rainy season or during the flooding times, there were rust particles coming from the borehole when it is being pumped, which is not healthy for the community members. Next slide. As Jesse, under the WASH SDG program, we came up with interventions in the area. We created trenches of about 1,500 meters. These trenches have the retention points and the retention ponds. Next slide. As you can see, there are retention points that help in the percolation of the water in the gardens, as it has already been assessed by the Ministry of Water and Environment of Uganda. The water, when it percolates into the garden, it goes about up to around 100 meters, making the crops around the area to always yield good. And then also the vegetation cover around the area is always green because of that the soil is always moist. And then also the retention ponds, water is always filled there. And then it is used for domestic use, for watering of the vegetables, and then also consumption by the animals. Next slide, please. Another intervention was building, training the community to build wash latrine technology, resilient wash latrine technologies. These latrines they're built in a way that whenever it floods, it takes some time to fall off because the floor is always raised higher with the local available materials. Before it is raised up, it is again, there are some 2 inches that are built down so that it is made stronger. Whenever the water runoffs and then the flooding comes, it is able to withstand the floods. Next slide. Another intervention, all we did was to sensitize our community members on how they can prevent or reduce the floods in the area, what they can do in their gardens to make other trenches in the garden so that water logging is reduced. Thank you. Next slide. So these are the outcomes from the intervention that we have been doing. That is one of the retention ponds, which is it's a storage for water. This water is always for water for production. This water is always used, as I earlier mentioned, for animal consumption, and then also watering of the vegetables. And then also it helps in groundwater recharge as it percolates down. Next slide. As earlier had mentioned, groundwater recharge from the retention ponds and the retention points, it has led to the rise in the groundwater level for easy pumping, as we're also expecting. But this one, we have assessed it in one of the project areas that we are working in, and we hope this one will also do the needful in the coming days. Next slide. Another outcome is vegetation cover and the crop yields. In where there are retention points, the water always percolates to the ground 100 meters. So the crops and the vegetation around is always green because the soils are always moist. Next slide. There are prospects that we plan to do. We plan to add more transverse and retention points. These transverse trenches takes the water up to River Gago, and then the retention points will also be created so that the groundwater recharge, and then also the vegetation cover and the rest will be good. And then also maintenance planned by the community. They're already doing it because the community now owns what they've created, the trenches, so they're able to maintain it. In a year, they're supposed to clean it up every quarter, every after 4 months. Then also, we advise them also to do more of soil and water conservation technologies in their gardens, at least to reduce on the waterlogging in their gardens, and then they will also get more yields. And then planting of the grasses and vegetables on the soil heaps. The grasses will always hold the soils so that siltation is reduced in the trenches. And then also the vegetation around the borehole, so that at least the water there is always, and the soils are always held to reduce on the siltation. Next slide. Those are the pictures, as you can see, the flooding of the gardens, and then the people also participating in the creating of the trenches, because now we involve the community members, and then also the district stakeholders. We have also been able to work with the Ministry of Water and Environment to assess how these trenches can work. We have this question. Can the basic nature-based approaches be used as a first line of response to climate change-induced floods in remote and hard-to-reach communities? Thank you. I'm Aaron Okulo from Jesse. Thank you.
Thank you, Heron, also for this great insight in the work that you're doing in the Agadwa district in Uganda. We'll move on to discussing these interesting cases and questions in the panel discussion. But first, we're going to do a very quick poll check-in. So this is again on the Pathable, what we just did. And we have a question there for you. It's also on the next slides. You can show it. Yes. So this is on the Pathable website where you access the Zoom chat, and would like to hear from you how curious you are about hearing more about these cases and sharing your experience, because that's what we'll do now. So please let us know. You can rate from 1 to 5, I think, and then we can see how many stars we end up with. And in the meantime, I'll give the floor to Geerte to introduce the panel.
Thanks, Femke. I think we had like 3 very different presentations. One was about gender and social inclusion and climate resilience. The other one about mitigation adaptation in an urban context. And the third one about more rural and water conservation, soil and water conservation context. So different strategies to adapt to or to even mitigate climate change. So the next step will be at the end of every presentation there was a statement and a comment. question. The next step will be that we have a panel discussion about these statements, and you can also raise your hand. And I saw already in the chat there is some discussion already ongoing, so that's really great. Let me first introduce you to the panel. First of all, we have Harry Ferdian from Indonesia. You have seen him already in the video a bit. Harry is a community development professional with more than 10 years of experience in the WASH sector. Has extensive experience in project management, child protection, climate change adaptation, gender equality and social inclusion, holds a bachelor degree in social science from the Catholic University in Bandung. At present, Harry is working for Plan International Indonesia as a WASH SDG project manager, managing multi-year WASH projects in Eastern Indonesia. Welcome, Harry.
Yeah, thank you, Hertha.
Yeah, welcome. We also have Maria in the panel. You already met Maria during the presentation. I just want to mention here that in addition to her experience in Zambia and Southern Africa, she also has quite some experience in West Africa and Southeast Asia. We also have in the panel Godfrey Rupumayo. He is the deputy director of one of the Y partners in Uganda, the JESI, partner of the Uganda WASH Alliance, and he's the program manager. He holds a Master of Science in Natural Resource Management and a postgraduate qualification in Planning and Management of Community Development Programs. He has over 90 years of experience working in social and economic sector development, organizational and program development. And of course, water, environment, and natural resource management. Then last but not least, we also have in the panel John Butterworth. He is working with IRC. Just to mention, IRC is also one of the Y partners, and IRC is also assisting or the WASH SDG program in the learning and knowledge development trajectory for WASH and climate. So that's also why John Butterworth is in the panel. He has a background in hydrology and the provision of water and sanitation services, and he's a director of IRC's Change Hub, where he is involved in thinking along with IRC's country teams on how to adapt to climate change that is threatening IRC's mission to build strong water and sanitation systems and services. Welcome, John, Godfrey, Maria, and Harry. Great to have you on the panel. Just for people, the people on the panel, except for John, are also related to the sub-programs that just presented something, but the presenters are also still available later on for Q&A. So all three presentations ended with a question or a statement. And I would like to start maybe with the last presentation of Haran in Uganda. I'm just going to read out we have it here on the screen as well. The last presentation was about the question was, can basic nature-based approaches be used as a first line of response to climate change-induced floods in remote and hard-to-reach communities? So we now had an example of how it was working in Uganda. So maybe I can ask one of the panel members to respond based on their experience. Harry, maybe I can give you the floor. Is it working in Indonesia? Is the approach already used, or what is your opinion and view on this based on your experience and expertise?
Yes, thank you, Hertha. And I would like to thank you to everyone for a great presentation as well, for Aaron and Maria. But please allow me to respond to Aaron, for the presentation on the nature-based solution or approach on the climate change. I think my first response would be this is a great approach. Nature-based approach is I think it's a good approach for climate climate adaptation in WASH or other sector, because nature-based is low cost. Yeah, everyone can do it with and there is no high cost. Yeah, so we can do it with the low cost process, and also because the nature-based solution is can impact to rehabilitation of the nature and environment. That's why the nature-based approach is one of the good solution to make sure the environment is rehabilitated. Yeah, and then I also see that the from the JSC experience and learning, I think this is a good example on how they can make the community to have a commitment. Yeah, I see that in the presentation there is a sensitization process to the community, so they can engage or participate in the process. I see that they in the case of presented in the JSC presentation, they succeed to build 1.5 kilometers of trenches. I think this is a big result. Yeah, which I think is great that everyone in the community can participate to build that trenches. I think 1.5 kilometer is very long, which is great. So I think this is the participatory process also a great example. Yeah, and so therefore I would like to appreciate on that process for JSC team. But I also have concern, and maybe you can also respond to my concern, that I think nature-based solution can be the first line on the climate change adaptation, but for my opinion, I think nature-based solution takes a very long time, yeah, to complete the process, because what I understand that the nature-based solution, for example, like planting tree or mangroves, yeah, so it takes a while or really a long time to make sure that the trees or the mangrove can grow in the like 2 or 3 years or maybe more. So we need to make sure that the community has the commitment to make sure that they can continue or to sustain the nature-based solution. And the other concern is that I think in nature-based solution can be very applied, or can be applied really well in rural, but not so much in the urban. But please correct me if I'm wrong, because in urban, many buildings have been built and the environment already damaged or destroyed, and how to bring it back to nature process will be very challenging in the urban context. Yeah, but above all, I think what JSC presented is one of the good example on how can we rehabilitate the nature or environment to make sure that everything is going to be normalized.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Harry. So you see a very clear link to nature-based solutions and being inclusive, the JSC. But then you also raised 2 concerns. Maybe Godfrey, are you willing to respond on those concerns? You mentioned the time it takes before it is effective, and the other one, is it applicable in urban setting? That was the other concern. Godfrey, are you willing to respond to that?
Yes, I think I agree entirely with Henry when he mentions that the local-based solutions really a short-term solution. Yes, I agree. And when you look at what Haron has presented, that is just a drop in the ocean. Just 1.5 kilometers of a trench can't even cover the entire village of Camrono. So that means we need to invest a lot in terms of capacity building of the community. We need to invest a lot in terms of resources to ensure that the entire community is catered for. Yes, in terms of being the first line of control floods, yes, it can work. But like I say, we need to other resilient technologies. Like for instance, in Agago, whenever rain is coming, about 800 housing units, the huts, they get submerged in floods. That means we need to think abroad and see, can we have maybe some climate resilient technologies, maybe in housing? Can we have climate resilient technology, for instance, in harvesting this water that is very abundant during the rainy seasons? When you move around Agago, you will see a lot of surface runoff water flowing in the valleys and trenches. So if we could have a deliberate effort, say the government to harvest this water, that can be used during the dry season for watering crops, that would be good. But also the drainage works. In that part of the area also, there's a very poor drainage works which greatly affects the road and transport movement of people from here and there. So I think we need to also look at how do we improve that for Agago. Then for urban settings, I think I agree also with Henry. I think we need to look at other high-end technologies that can be applied in the urban setting, but for rural, we can look at those other small efforts that the community can be empowered to work on. That's what I can respond for now.
Yeah, thanks, Godfrey. Maybe just thinking of it, what happens in the Netherlands is that you get a lot of subsidies for green roofs, so that people put plants on the roofs to collect water, so that there is less urban flooding going on. Is one of the other panel members would like to respond to this? If so, please let me know. And otherwise, because of time, it's always the same a bit. I would like to proceed already with the second statement. Is that okay for you, John and Maria? Or is there a burning thing you want to share on this? No, then I will proceed with the second statement already, which was at the end of Maria's presentation. There we really saw that a service model, all the benefits of a service model were mentioned there, also related to climate adaptation, so that they can, emptying in the flood-prone areas just before the floods are normally coming. But however, they also refer to in this recent article that was published about that it might even have, can be used for mitigation strategies, these scheduled desludging. So I'm just going to read out the statement. How can a sanitation service model assist with climate change adaptation and mitigation? That is the question. And we all have to keep in mind that this mitigation part, it's all quite new. It's as published 2 months ago, so probably not all the answers. But maybe, John, I can give you the floor to give your reflection on this.
Sure. Yeah, so thanks. I mean, real pleasure to comment on this case, which I found really very interesting. I mean, and it made me also think about a couple of years ago when I was sitting in a meeting where it was being discussed, like it happens every year, what will the theme be for World Water Day and World Toilet Day? This was in 2020, I think, so 2 years ago in Stockholm, if I remember correctly. And at that time, there was a lot of discussion about whether there was enough of a link between sanitation and climate change to make World Toilet Day the topic of the theme that year, because it was already decided it would be on water and climate. And in the end, it was about sanitation and climate as well. And I think that shows how we're moving quite fast is the encouraging news. We are actually now seeing these links, and we're starting to see them, like you've just seen them over the last few months, and been surprised by this research. And I think that sort of shows where we are making some progress here. The case gave a really convincing answer, I think, to this question, you know, of many, many ways. There was a long list there, was it 12? Of how, in this case, providing fecal sludge management services is supporting adaptation and mitigation. And I think this is a really interesting sort of problem we have generally of getting together our WASH community with a climate change community and people involved in climate finance and so on. And I'm not sure we have that many of the people, those kind of people in this session, because we have a challenge where we think we've made quite a lot of mistakes in the water and sanitation provision, and we now know maybe some better solutions. And this looks like it's, you know, a really good program in trying to extend fecal sludge management services. Whereas coming from the climate side, we see a lot of interesting things that are additional, are about you know, doing things differently to address climate resilience. Well, I think you could actually argue in this case, it's not so much doing things differently and not what we would consider from a sanitation perspective. Anyway, this looks like a very state-of-the-art, great program to try and extend sanitation businesses. So that's a challenge we have to deal with, but this case helps because it really clearly put that on the table of how this is supporting adaptation and mitigation. And I think putting in the front, yeah, I mean, it does bring us back to the fact that people with good services are more resilient. And I think it's also true that local institutions that can do things like this are also going to be more resilient. And I'm not sure we've fully landed those points yet with people who might want to fund climate finance work. And yeah, I mean, the point I also picked up that I really liked from the, you know, from this recent research, which suggests that emptying pits is a really good thing with respect to reducing emissions because, yeah, because they are so important. We see the case in Kampala where they think that's maybe over 50% of the total emissions is coming from waste that's left in pits for too long. I think one interesting finding there was also about the fact that it's not fully financially viable to provide these services, at least not at levels that are affordable to your customers. And that opens the suggestion to whether, should this be subsidized or should it have some kind of climate finance supporting it? And I think that's where I really think you should engage on this case with, I'm not sure whether you've already done this, but with the decision makers in Zambia who are planning the national action plans and so on, or climate finance type programs.
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you. Maria, can you respond to this, and especially on the finance part, I think, yeah, and the whole include making resilient locally institutions.
Thank you. Thank you for the comments, John, and for the questions. Well, yes. Well, it is fecal sludge management services in themselves are not innovative. I mean, largely the whole world is doing that with the support or not of external partners. What is innovative in the concept that we propose is the scheduled aspect of it. So it takes away the randomness of people calling for the service whenever they need and brings in an organized calendar for the provision of the service. That also brings the possibility of affordability gains, as I detailed before. Maybe because I mentioned that in Kwacha, I think the affordability aspect was not so clearly highlighted. So what happens without a scheduled program is that whenever the household needs the service, they call for it. And the official service costs randomly roughly $30, more or less. So when the person needs, the service comes, $30 are paid upfront. And that is very unaffordable for the lowest wealth quintiles. Now, when you move into a scheduled desludging program in which you have your customers registered, instead of having that lump sum payment, the utility can charge attached to the water bill a monthly fee. So we brought it down from $30, the lump sum, to less than $1 a month. So that becomes affordable even for the lowest wealth quintiles. And in terms of financial sustainability of the service itself, from the utility's point of view, it's just $1, right? But it's every month and it's every household and it builds over time. So it generates an amount of revenue that the utility can then use to reinvest in the system. So it's actually a solution that tackles two problems that seem to be incompatible, which is how to increase affordability and increase the sustainability of the service at the same time. So the scheduled aspect of it, I think it really allows that possibility. In addition to, of course, as we saw, the mapping of the customers, also allowing the utility to understand who are the households that are in flood-prone areas and being able to service those first, which again would not be possible on an on-call model, but it is definitely possible on a scheduled model. And I think that's all I want to respond.
Thank you, Maria. Yeah, we have one question and one statement to go that is related to the first presentation actually about Indonesia, and we also have just a few minutes to go as well. I'm sorry for that. I would have liked to extend it a bit more, but then the question is, well, the statement is climate resilient and emergency-friendly WASH. How to make it happen in your context? Maybe Godfrey, I can ask it to you as well, based on your Uganda experience. So how can we make climate resilient and emergency-friendly WASH happening in your context?
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, one of the issues could be engaging with the private sector and also local entrepreneurs that can be in position to assist in the construction of these climate resilient WASH technologies. We are doing this in the program in Angago, but I think what is still lacking is how do we have these concrete technologies that can be inclusive enough to even for people with disabilities. So it's about really building private and local entrepreneurs that can carry on the replication and promotion of these technologies within the community. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you all for your contribution. I see some questions and examples also coming in the chat. About how it about Uganda, Malawi. I see a result. I see an example of deep bed farming and rain infiltration. For now, I would like to give the floor to Femke to give a short recap on the panel discussion. And then after that, we will ask Bertje Paardenkoper, the Senior Water Advisor from the Dutch Ministry, to give a reflection on the session. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Geert, and thank you to the panel. Great to hear all your insights and ideas about the different statements. It's nice to hear that, for instance, in Indonesia, the nature-based approaches is also felt as like very effective sometimes. It can rehabilitation of the natural environment, what Hiri said, and that Godfrey added that it's nice to and good to combine with climate resilient technologies. On the financial aspects of the FESM, we heard some about that. Very also innovative research and also a lot of things to talk about later. And just to mention, we have some time left and when the session ends, so please continue the discussion in the chat, and answers that are not answered yet will answer on the Paddable chat that you can access after this session still. So yes, I would like to give the word to Bertje Paardenkoper to give some reflections.
Thank you very much, Femke. I think, I don't know whether you did it consciously, but you nicely did it, put your presentations on different levels. First of all, the level of the individual infrastructure, then secondly, on the level of the WASH system, and thirdly, on the level of the water system. You didn't mention that, but it was quite funny. And I have a few takeaways. Well, the first one, of course, is if you decide to make your infrastructure inclusive, you can just as well immediately make it climate proof, which was what the plan showed. Secondly, what SNV showed was that, funny enough, the planning systems that you need to make your fecal sludge system financially viable can also help in identifying where the climate risks are, which is also very interesting. And thirdly, that was the one from Uganda on the water system level, which is very interesting. And I know they have a lot of other projects they're dealing with IWRM. I think that is the future, actually, that we have not WASH system projects, but we have WASH and IWRM integrated in the same project. And lastly, I would like to follow up a little bit on what John said. I think our challenge now is not so much to look inside our WASH systems and IWRM systems to see how we can make it a little bit more climate proof, but maybe invite some climate scientists to look at our WASH systems and water systems, and from their point of view, and see what is necessary to really make it climate proof in a way that really contributes to a climate resilient society. So that would be, I think, a next step and an interesting one. And I think I keep it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Brecht, and I fully agree with you that the future might be that we have to IWRM and WASH should be more integrated, and a very good idea on having another climate expert looking at the WASH sector, and especially if we talk about this article, I think that would be the next step. Like, okay, the greenhouse emissions are this high in the sanitation sector. How can we make sure to mitigate that? So thank you, Brecht, for your reflection. And I definitely also would like to thank all the presenters and the panel members for their contributions. So Henry, Hera, Neki, Maria, John, Godfrey, and Harry, thank you. And also Femke and the people at the back, Sandra and Saskia were assisting as well. Thank you all. Adapting to climate change and mitigation is very important, and we all know it's urgent. It's an urgent journey. And I therefore really hope that this session has helped in generating some ideas on how to improve the relevant strategies and methodologies in our work. We have a big and important battle in front of us, achieving the WASH SDG 6 goals, or all actually, in 2030 in a very changing context, and then I refer to climate change. So let's all together not think that we know all the answers, but let's keep learning from each other and improve step by step. So thank you all for your participation and contribution. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, everyone. I couldn't have said it better. If you want to stay in touch, please contact us through the email address in the chat or here on the slide, or approach one of us directly. I wish you all a great water week. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.